Welcome to Act React, a podcast where we explore improvisation through conversations with remarkable artists. I'm the host, Daniel Burkholder, a dance artist based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Today, I am joined by Kata Kovacs, a sound artist and interdisciplinary performer from Berlin. I didn't know Katya before this conversation, but I'm so glad that I've gotten to know her a little bit and been introduced to her work. I'm sure after this conversation, you'll want to find her out in the world and see what she's doing. Really, the work is really fascinating and deeply engaging. Let's see. Before we get started, a little bit about Katya. Kata Kovacs is a sound artist and interdisciplinary performer, a 2007 graduate of Budapest Contemporary Dance School. She has been living in Berlin since 2011. She is active in several ensembles, including RAU, KVT, Fake Company, and a long-term collaboration with artist Tom O'Dowry. Her works often focus on contemplation and repetition, on the movement of sound in space, and on the performative possibilities of unusual spatial situations. Her works have been presented nationally and internationally in California, Lisbon, Berlin, Sweden, and Budapest. All right, so let's get started with our conversation with Katya. Enjoy. Well, hi, Kata. Thank you so much for joining me on this Act React podcast. Our mutual friend, Nicole Bindler, kind of connected us, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you and see where it goes.
Hi, Dania. Thanks for having me. And thanks, Nico, for the connection.
Yeah, definitely. So this kind of a variation of the question I usually start with anyone is just today in your life, in your work, in your creative process, in your day-to-day, what you do, how does improvisation show up, inform, kind of happen within those contexts, I guess?
Well, I suppose there's the artistic answer, like I work with improvisation as an
Yep.
artist, but then there's also which is probably a bit of a cliche, but we improvise every day, like
Yeah.
we decide whether we cross the street or not. When the car is coming, we adjust how much time we have to cross. So that's just the basic example, but we
Yeah.
pretty much improvise every day, even on a basic level. But more importantly, or more specifically, I do work with improvisation on an artistic level. I work as a sound artist and as a performing artist. My background is in dance, so I come more from specifically movement-based work. And then I turned more towards, I suppose, sound-based work. Improvisation and performance is still a strong element in all of those.
Yeah. Great. So maybe we can kind of suss out some of those things that you already mentioned. And I was thinking maybe it might be interesting to start by talking about your band, Vrau. Is that how you say it?
It's funny. Yes, similarly to that, it's a Dutch word.
Okay.
So I'm also not 100% sure how to pronounce it. It's similar to the German Frau.
Okay.
But Dutch pronounces that beginning sound somehow between V and F. But
Okay.
yeah, Frau.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'll work on that, definitely. Yeah. So could you talk a little bit, I was as I was getting ready to talk with you today, I was watching some of your videos and stuff like that, and watching the video that you have on the website of the band, I was really struck by this feeling, or this kind of what I interpreted it as, like a deep listening to one another. Like there was just a lot of kind of like concentrated listening, and then the sound continually evolved out of that. So I don't know if that seems like visceral to you or right in there, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the process that you all go through in terms of performing together.
Yeah, Frau is one of the most exciting projects that I'm participating in at the moment. It came out from a completely improvised situation, which was that we were on tour, three separate bands, or like three bands that we were all in one van touring together. And one day we had this idea that maybe we want to shake it up a little bit and not perform in the usual combinations how we have performed, but to make it something else. And it was in a living room setup, so it was very casual. And we just decided that the five of us should play together. Otherwise, we were all in different formations. And it was very exciting. We are friends, separate from being bandmates, and we also have known each other from different contexts. So we have a lot of layers of connection, but playing music together we haven't done. We have played with the same people, even like in different combinations, but with each other, the five of us in this combination, we have never played before. And afterwards, we just got really excited about it all. And the same evening, we decided for the name. We were in the Netherlands at the time, so that's how the word came from the Dutch language. And then it just started to roll from there. And I think what you're saying about kind of like a deep listening or a deep connecting to each other when we're playing is a good way to think about it. I find it the challenge and the interesting thing in improvisation, I find, and especially improvising with more people together, the coexistence of simultaneously trying to follow your own thread, like doing what you're building in that, whatever you're doing in the moment, and trying to stay in that, but at the same time also trying to listen to everybody else and not just do your own thing. And I think that's, to me, that somehow like boils down to the core of improvisational skills, this kind of simultaneous staying with yourself and staying true to your own process, but also listening to the others and tapping into what's happening in the room.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like that skill, I think, is kind of at a core when you get to performing, right? That inner sourcing, but also outer awareness, and finding that balance. I'm curious, like when you all are performing together, what parameters, what scores, what do you have? What do you know when you go into the performance with the group?
We mostly know what we have with us.
You know, like what instruments, what little gadgets, what little things you have. Yeah.
Like I think that's probably what we all have a main direction. No, like we kind of know what we're generally playing or what kind of little gadgets or instruments we use, but there is some range in that selection, and I think that's probably that's probably also true for the others. It's definitely true for myself that before we go into a session, I sit down with my things and I decide what I want to bring and what not. Or if I just decide to bring really everything, or I found something new that I'm excited about, or something that I haven't used in a long time and I want to bring it back.
Yeah.
And so that for sure defines something, at least what I have available. And then, but we don't really work with scores, although sometimes we do. In a rehearsal situation, sometimes we would bring in some wishes. Mm-hmm. I know. I wish to hear all five of us vocalizing. Or I had my radio with me, and then one of my band members said that I would really like to hear the radio. And then that's kind of a super simple score for me. That try to bring in the radio at one point. And then sometimes we give ourselves time frame, or that's mostly how we structure ourselves to give a time frame.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's great. So it's fairly open when you're performing. I mean, it's very open. It's just limited really by the location that you're in, the time frame that you have to perform, and the kind of the sound options that you have in front of you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's really wonderful. And I guess then maybe just one more question around this is like, then when you're in performance, I mean, you've already kind of touched on this idea of balancing like your own inner impulses or desires, and balancing that with what everyone else is doing. But I don't know if you can tease out, and I know this is maybe a difficult question, like tease out like when you're listening and when you're finding that balance, how do you choose when to kind of step forward a little bit or step back a little bit? I know
That's a
this
good
is
question.
I know it's maybe a little esoteric in some ways, but that's for me also like that's a curious moment when people understand when to do that, right? I'm
Yeah,
curious if you could just wrestle with that idea for a moment.
yeah. I think this group in particular is quite special for me because because as I said, the the basis for our collaboration is also various friendships within the group, with some people deeper, with some people less
Yeah.
deep, but there is definitely a long time friendship, supporting each other in Berlin, all being sorry, Ausländer, the German word for I suppose we're all immigrants in a way.
Yeah.
We're all coming from somewhere else and living in Berlin, and so that is a strong connection. That's what I'm trying to get at. And I think I personally, with this group, I often really try to just feel it.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the end, it's gonna come to that esoteric, as you said. Yeah, that is, I think, with this group in particular, I have a lot of trust that I can, that I don't even have to do all the mental work of, like, this is what's happening now, this is what's happening now, is there space for me, but
Yeah.
more just trying to feel it in. I also believe, I think we have maybe a tendency of more stepping back than stepping forward, but that's something that I am interested in, a practice that, if somebody is stepping forward and that feels like there's too much happening, that the others should theoretically also be in that listening mode, and then maybe they are stepping out, or more people decide to then just step in and then just bring some chaos,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
some really full dance moment. So in the abstract, I believe that stepping forward doesn't always have to come when there is space for it, that it can also really like come forward and let the rest readjust. Of course, in the practice, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
And
I
it
mean,
really needs that trust.
yeah, I mean, you're right. I was just thinking about that word of trust, and really trusting the other people that you're improvising with, so that when you're making a choice, they'll kind of be aware of it, and they'll respond in a way that is authentic to them, but also respectful of you, and vice versa, that you're doing the same thing for them. And then whatever choices people are making, it's like trusting that it's for the whole of what's happening. It's not like, oh, here's so and so doing another solo, like taking up that, like, because they just want to. I remember I worked with an improvisation trio when I lived in Washington D.C., and at one point there was a bass player, and it just felt like his goal was always just to play as much as possible. He was all like he was all like just like going and going and going, and afterwards I was like, and it was like that kind of idea of wishes, like I wish there was more like silence or spaciousness in in this time or whatever. And it's like that was a harder situation to develop that trust because you weren't sure if they were always listening in the same way. So
Yeah.
yeah.
There's something that I love about this question. And I'm not 100% sure that this comes from this person, but I think I want to credit Stephanie Maher for
Yes.
this, who I did learn a lot from her about improvisation. And this, the idea that you're in an improvisation, it can be movement, it can be sound, it can be anything. You're in an improvisation and somebody is doing something that you just really don't like. And you just wish that they stop, or you really don't like, or you think it's going on for too long, or you wish for a change in the atmosphere, anything, but something where you can't. It's not something where you know that, oh, it's missing this thing. It's more this thought of like there's too much of something, and you can't take that out because that's the choice of your mate who has chosen to do that. And so what can you do to still change the thing? You can't remove that thing, but you can maybe put in something else that will bring in a transition moment that will then at least bring a change. Maybe it's not going to bring the kind of the change that you maybe envisioned for yourself,
Right.
but it will bring some kind of a change. And then ultimately it will maybe give the space for you to bring in the kind of the atmosphere that you have been wishing for.
Yeah.
And this is something that I really love playing with. And this comes up more, I think. I think it maybe also sometimes comes up with the music practices, but the Fake Company, which is the movement-based improvisation ensemble that I'm also working with, I think there I feel this often of this question of how can I change the atmosphere to something else without bringing in the exact atmosphere that I want to have. Like
Right.
how can just ignite a change and then see what comes from that change.
Yeah, no, it's that's a great observation, is because in that improvisational context you can't, you're not directing, you're not in charge of the thing, so you can't dictate the change. You can offer like, oh, here's some other energy, here's another idea, and let's see what the group comes. And I think that also comes back to this idea of trust, that you'll trust that the people you're improvising with will recognize, respond, support, challenge, but something in a way that is again like towards the wholeness of what is happening, and not just having their own good time.
Yeah, and
right?
that's my other favorite experience that I had more in movement based improvisation, when you get yourself into a situation that you can't really get out of by yourself, and then to just surrender to the space and to this trust that something will happen and something will, because of course, like whatever, you go into a big process and then you end that process and then you don't know what's next. And of course you could just get up and move on to the next thing, but if you stay true to yourself, you don't really have a reason to do that, or it's not yet time to do that, or something like that. And then that feeling of, okay, I'll just have to trust and surrender and stay calm, and something will come. And that's one of the most amazing feelings that I have experienced in improvisations, when then I'm able to stay with that surrender, and then that something is coming, and that something is giving me another context within which I can move on from whatever I am.
Yeah, I mean, I remember because I lived in San Francisco for a little while, so I know a lot of like Stephanie and Jess Curtis and Keith Hennessy and Kathleen Hermersdorf and that whole
Yeah.
the whole world was and I remember I think it was a contact improv class with Jess Curtis, and he was talking about like when you're in a dance and you get to a place where you kind of feel stuck, don't bail on that moment. Don't like give up on that moment. Stay in that stuck place for a little while and see what emerges, you know? And sometimes, I mean, I think I remember even thinking about like doing a trio and, you know, doing a contact improv trio can you can get stuck because it's like there's three of you and it's just, you're sometimes even physically, you're just like in a place, it's like, okay, I don't know what's happening. And instead of just kind of like releasing from it and then re-engaging to like break it, just to stay there, and something always happens, right?
Something
Something
always
has to
happens. Yeah.
happen. Something's going to happen. So don't give up on it. And um and then something unexpected, something that you couldn't imagine often happens. And those are really
Yeah.
magic moments too, I think that. So kind of we brought up dance, you brought up dance, and kind of like, so one of the things that was interested in, and because of your dance background, like I was thinking about like carried bells and a practice of falling. Again, some of these things that I saw on your website is that there's sound, but there's also this attention to like physical action. And maybe could you talk a little bit about that connection between movement, physical action, and sound, and how that has some interest or importance to you?
Hmm. Yeah. So some of the works that are on my website, it's not so clearly differentiated, but some of the works are part of a larger body of work in collaboration with Tomo Daherty, which, for example, Carried Bells
Yeah.
is a work together with him. We have worked together for over 10 years now. And in the works with him, um, our focus always was movement, or some sort of a physical presence was always present in the important in those works. And I think our works also changed in the process of time, from more performative things to things that are maybe more existing online and doesn't so much have a strong physical presence.
Yeah.
But still, in my understanding, as like works, for me, works are interesting when there is some kind of a performative element to them. And that performative element can be that the work, our online work called Minute Year, it all exists only online. It creates a minute long sound recording every
Yes.
day.
Yeah.
But whatever is being recorded is, for me, some kind of a performance. And that it can be then more or less conscious performance. It can be just surrounding environmental sounds that's maybe not so conscious choice. Or who knows whether the light decides to start buzzing in the time of the minute because of performative interest. But then it can be from human actions that's still not a conscious choice. Somebody just walks through the space and creates sound. But then it's really interesting for us to see whether people decide to interact with the work. Whether people choose to do something consciously, something really for the minute, to perform for the minute. And yeah, that's maybe the more indirect performance element in the works. But yes, indeed, in Carried Bells, we did in 21 consecutive days, we walked from one place in the city where we recorded the sound of a bell to a central place. And so these walks ranged from 20 minutes to 5 hours.
Wow.
And that was also like the physical activity of walking and the documentation of our walk through the city, but also our perception of walking through the city, were also important. We're coming to a bit of a technical situation here.
Okay. So yeah, just what I really loved about, like, especially say Carried Bells, since you were just talking about it, is that it's like there's so many ways to experience it as well, but either from your perspective or from a observer's perspective or whatever. Is like you can go to the place where all of these speakers have been gathered and just listen to the bells and just listen as an audio experience, right? Then also kind of an intellectual kind of reflection on the fact that these are bells from across the city, and that they were all, so it's like a gathering of bells from the whole city in one place to hear the like the bell music or something of the city, but all in one place. And then there's also the experience of like you walking, or even people seeing you walk with the bell, with the speaker, and then of course there's like this documentation of all these walks. So it's like there's all these layers, that, I mean, I love that idea of having a project like that where there's all these different aspects and people could experience one part of it, but it's the wholeness of it that is the project. It's not like just the end result of hearing all the bells together is the piece. It's all of these pieces are the piece. And so it's also this kind of, there's this kind of subjectivity on how someone experiences what aspects of the piece that gives them an insight into what the experience of it is. So yeah, so there's something really attractive or engaging or kind of exciting about that for me, of like, oh, it's not a single piece of art, but it is, but it's also all these other pieces that combine, that weave together to create this kind of event and experience. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's something there for you to respond to, but that was certainly my kind of observation of kind of looking at it through the lens of the website, at least.
Yeah, I think we also a little bit out of necessity, sometimes we create related works to the works that we do, partly because a lot of the works that we do are either taking up a lot of time,
yeah,
or a lot of space. And so yeah, we do work with duration a lot, and sometimes it's helpful to grab some part of the work in a different form and to share that kind of selected frame,
yeah,
to give some kind of an access point to the work, because yeah, otherwise sometimes it can be quite large. Like
yeah,
Militier, what I mentioned, is a work that has been going on for 6 years.
yeah,
Carried Bells was 20 days, 21 days, and every day with a long distance walked. We have another work called Increments, which was a single performance that lasted 5 hours. And yeah, like all of these things are then not so easy to share in a compact way unless we create some kind of a variation or a version of it that's through which maybe people can at least get the beginning idea, and then if they want to listen to 5 hours of sound recording, then it's great.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I certainly have done similar. I had a project a number of years ago now called Unmapped, and it was a duet between myself and a musician, and we taught each other elements of each other's work. He plays guitar and he does a lot of looping and stuff like that. And so he taught me the basics of how to like engage with his equipment. And then we had sessions in the studio and I worked with him on movement and stuff like that. And the idea was that in performance, we were going to kind of switch places and see what happened. And it ended up being about a 35 to 40 minute work. And we performed it on the hour, every hour for 25 hours straight. And the idea was that over time, we kind of disintegrate in some ways. Like we just get so friggin' tired that just, and so people would come and watch for 1 hour. And that was kind of like the little nugget of what they saw. So in their mind, that was the thing. But it was the arc over those 25 hours that was the thing. So it was like both, like, as you said, like for us, yeah, it was the full 25 hours was the piece, but people could have something more snackable in a way, right? They could just, here's 40 minutes that you can experience and you have an idea of the thing without seeing the whole thing necessarily. But we did have some people come back, multiple times during that to see how it was progressing or changing or what have you. But duration is something that's really fascinating in terms of offering it as an experience. Like I love the fact that like this sound project has been going on for 6 years and there's this huge archive now of what it is and what it has been, and and that it continually is like it's always the same but always changing as well, right? So that's really lovely. So I don't want to keep you much longer. We've so many interesting things that you brought up, and I was on your website, you did talk about repetition and maybe like the sound thing. There's a certain like an idea of repetition and the carrying of the bells every day. There's repetition, and I think that's just a really interesting idea, and it's something that I've been interested in lately as well. So, like, maybe you could talk a little bit about the relationship between repetition and just looping it back into more specifically improvisation. And do you see a relationship there or a tension there, or like what's that coming together of both kind of understanding or working with repetition and even when we're improvising? Is there, or do you feel like those are separate things?
Can you repeat this one, this last, like repetition and improvisation?
Repetition and improvisation, like what's that, how do those things meet, or do they kind of just rub up against one another and don't necessarily?
I see. Good question. I'm totally fascinated with repetition, and it's something that I love doing. I love using as a form of working. And I do work with improvisation, so I suppose I should try to bring the point here that they don't rub up against each other and that they totally can work with each other. Let me see. I think maybe this is related to the question of improvisation versus chord-based improvisation, or like open improvisation versus score-based improvisation. Which is also something that I do a lot with my other band KVT.
Oh yeah.
So in comparison to Frau, maybe Frau is completely open improvisation with, if scores, as I said, like very minor, small constraints. Whereas with KVT, we really work with scores. Okay. And a lot of repetition. And I do think that it belongs to the area of improvisation, although we probably work with quite much structure. I think I would think of this as a scale or as a range. Like I think something can be so strongly scored that there is little space for improvisation, and then, as we said, Frau, we can also say that there are those cores of what we bring with ourselves and how long we play, but that of course leaves much more space for improvisation. And then there is quite a big range in between. And I do like to think of all of that as improvisation up until the point when there is no space for improvisation.
Yeah.
Unless something unexpected happens, which can always happen, no? Like
Right.
even if you have the most structured thing and suddenly something happens and you have to deal with that on stage.
Yeah, totally. So let's touch on briefly about the scores that you do work with KVT, and like what do those, like what, when you have a score, what does that score consist of? Like what kind of elements, what kind of constraints, what kind of parameters are you putting in place?
With KVT, we really set the stepstones. So we define what kind of a musical element we use. I'm trying to say it now broadly without specifying, but of course, each item would be different in its specificity. But for example, maybe we know that we're going to sing, we know that we're going to pass the microphone, but we don't know exactly what notes we will sing.
Yeah.
And most importantly, with KVT, we use a lot with electroacoustics and with the characteristics of the space. So every space will sound different. And that's something that we basically always have to adjust to, even if we know what we're doing, it's always just going to be adjusted by the space and by the material environment in the space.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a certain amount of things that are pre-decided, but it's not. But there's still a lot of openness to it.
Yeah, there is a lot of openness and a lot of adjustments to make in the context.
Yeah. I mean, I think about like some improvisation practices that maybe are from more of like a jazz lineage, where they know the tempo, they know the key signature, they know the melody, but then there's still a lot of openness to what happens. But it sounds like it's not, the parameters you're using are a little different than that.
Yeah, and the outcome also.
Yeah, definitely the outcome. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. No one's going to mistake anything you do for like a Miles Davis track or anything.
Yeah, for all the similarities that might be there.
Yeah, great. Well, Kata, thank you so much for taking time today to talk with me. It was really wonderful to kind of tease out some of your thinking around improvisation and just the work that you're doing in the world. I really am excited to kind of have gotten to know you a little bit as an artist and stuff you're doing, and hopefully we can stay on each other's radar a little bit and maybe have a conversation again another time.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really lovely talking to you. And I'm also actually quite curious about the work that you were mentioning with the 25 hours. If you have anything online about it, I would be curious to take a look.
I think I have like a little like highlight reel. So I can send you a link to that.
Yeah, great.
Okay, great. Good. Well, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You too.
Thank you so much for listening to my conversation with Kata Kovacs. Please check out the show notes to any links of Katya out in the world. As always, if you have not, please subscribe to Act React. You can find us on YouTube, Apple or Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, even on Vimeo. So kind of lots of places to find us. Just to know that this is going to be the last episode for a little while. The rest of my spring and certainly into the summer is pretty extra busy. So it'll be a little while before I get to some more conversations in this series. So until those next episodes, please take care, be well, and live spontaneously.